Welcome back to the BCC Recap. My name's Evan.
I'm Andrew.
And we are so glad that you've joined us back on the BCC Pod. This is where we take what's happening in our church and what we're learning together and bring it into unscripted conversations that dive a little bit deeper. Whether you're tuning in on your drive at the gym or just relaxing at home, we're so glad that you're here. This week, we are back yet again talking about grace. And this week, it was boring. No, this week you were talking about
according to my wife.
Okay, I legitimately did you hear me say that she should come on the pod from the stage?
I did hear you say that.
It was so funny because Beck leaned over to me and she was like, he can't address it or he'll get thrown off. But I texted her. We were going to try and get her on, but it didn't work out. I was like,
oh, that would have been awesome.
Right?
She's in clinic today, but yeah.
She was like, I have to look. But I was like, it'd be great, too, if we could surprise Andrew.
With Krista finally getting a mic.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
But you were actually talking about the 6 perfections of grace this past weekend.
Yeah.
Do you want to, just give us a little bit of a recap?
Sure. This past weekend, we took a look, as Evan said, at the 6 perfections of grace. Also, we should mention, if you weren't in the second service, what we're referring to is that my lovely, lovely wife, just before I went up on stage, she said, "Is this going to be boring?" And so then we had a little bit of banter back and forth in the second service around whether my sermons are boring or not. No. So what we took a look at were really the 6 different perfections of grace. We took a look at, these are pretty big words, but like superabundance, singularity, priority, incongruity, efficacy, and non-circularity. And really what we were just trying to take a look at was grace through all these different kind of lenses. That was kind of the hope for the whole thing. And it really was, I talked about this at the beginning of the sermon, it really was a teaching sermon more than a preaching sermon. And I just think it was important for us to really try to dive deeply into what grace is. So what we kind of learned was that grace is really nuanced. It's not as simple and straightforward as we sometimes think. And it can be this lavish gift. It can be about the timing. It can be about the giver. There's just lots to it. And so that's what I hope to kind of show on Sunday, was just that it's much larger than we often think. And I think that's an important thing for us.
Yeah, I think it was a good description. I forget. Well, I mean, this whole series is called a kaleidoscope of grace, right? And like kaleidoscope might be a good way to think of it, right? That it's like, we're not talking about like types of grace, or it's not like they're not separate things, but it's like aspects, or like if you think of a kaleidoscope, like same stuff inside of it, but as you turn it, you see something different, or there's like a different.
That's exactly what we're trying to kind of do. Similar to how if you have like a diamond or whatever, you can turn it and see different facets to it. Like we're just trying to take grace and take a look at it through these different little lenses. Because I think especially when it comes to grace and those kind of 6 different perfections, you can look at it through one of them and forget about the other ones. So I want to have more of a holistic viewpoint on what grace really is. So yeah, that's what we're trying to see really on Sunday, that grace is beautiful, but it's also complex, it's layered, or the term that I really like, it's polyvalent, which means it just has multiple different frequencies that it's working at all at the same time. And that's what we were trying to teach through on Sunday, and hopefully to not make it boring, as my wife was saying. So
what was your main point and challenge from this past weekend?
So my main point really was that grace is no simple idea. It said that grace is beautiful, complex, and layered. And then my challenge really was, at the end, even though it really was a teaching Sunday, I tried to be really practical about what do these concepts mean in our lives. So we looked at 6 different ways to practice grace. And my challenge was then to really practice grace in one of the 6 ways that we kind of talked through, whether it's giving a lavish gift to someone, or thanking God every day for a gift that grace he's given to you, or you're sharing grace with special attention to the timing of things. And then we talked about journaling and repenting, and lastly, to give to someone anonymously. And hopefully that people we'll take that up this week and make our world a little bit more grace-filled.
Yeah. I hesitate to ask this because I did joke that it was boring, but was there anything you couldn't get to share that you wanted to? Was there a way to make it longer?
Was there more I could have packed into this one sermon?
Were there actually 7?
I could have talked more about John Barclay and how much I like his book. But no.
Yeah, honestly, that's real, because I was doing some digging just to do some prep for this podcast, and I came across this stuff, and I was like, this guy is so cool.
Yeah, it's really, really great. Yeah. So if you're interested in reading him, I would recommend it, although it is, like I've been reading quotes from him. It is theology proper.
Yeah.
It's not light spirituality kind of reading, but it's a really good one either way.
Nice.
So actually, what's interesting is that when he in his book, he talks about the main one in the Bible to be the main perfection of grace would be incongruity, which is really where we receive. It's about where you focus in on the receiver and how the giver of the gift and the receiver of the gift are in such different places, and that's really what there's this incongruity between the two, and that the grace isn't earned or worked for. It's just given to someone of a much lesser place or status, which I think is a part of grace too, especially when you think about God, that he's so much above us and who we are, that yet he still gives us his son, and that changes us and who we are. So yeah, that's what you'd say would be kind of the main one.
Yeah. Leave it to you to answer a question that I had written for the next segment of this show.
Okay, before we jump into the next segment, I don't even think I told Evan this. I hopefully last podcast did okay with the questions, because I was feeling super sick that day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so sick. And we'll just keep this. The podcast is a safe place, right?
Yeah, of course.
So sick that I actually ended up throwing up in the parking lot trying to get home. I did the podcast and I walked out the door to leave because I was like, I don't feel well.
Oh, my God.
So there's just an asterisk next to every one of my answers last week, because I'm not sure that I was in the space to be answering things. Yeah.
Like, if I went back and listened, I would probably see it now. But the fact that I didn't as we were doing it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm like, I'm not feeling well. And I was like, I think I'm just going to go home. And yeah, clearly I was not feeling well. So there's probably some video footage from security cameras or something like that.
Before we continue with our episode, we wanted to let you know about the marriage course coming up near the end of October. The marriage course is 7 sessions, and each one begins with sharing a dinner as a couple, followed by a fun, insightful video that covers topics that are relevant for you as a couple and can make your marriage better. Learn practical tools to deepen your connection and keep the spark alive. You can gain insight from interviews with leading psychologists and authors, and also enjoy private and intimate conversations as a couple, giving you the space to engage openly and honestly throughout each session. The cost per couple is $120 and includes everything that you need, including the meals each week. Check out the link in the description for details and to register. All right. So the first question that you already answered is, which perfection of grace do you think is most emphasized in the Bible?
Yeah.
Do you think there's one that's least emphasized?
Non-circularity, I would say, is least emphasized. This idea that I think that this idea is actually the least biblical of them. This idea that you can give a gift and there's no need for reciprocity, but that actually gift giving creates sometimes that need or that desire. And I think that's actually a good thing. That's why gift exchanges and like a gift culture is, you give a gift, but then you also then have this sense that you should as well participate in this gift giving of grace around. And so I think that one would be the one that would be the least, not that it's not biblical, but the least emphasized.
Yeah. The second question is, how should these 6 aspects or 6 perfections of grace inform our views on salvation?
I think what they should do is it should help us to think. I think that salvation is really, like, in some ways it's very simple. It's confess the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. But then in other ways it's really complex and it's really deep. And we should actually give that moment more weight in our lives and in our thoughts and in our reflections. That I think when we realize that grace is all about all of these, when it comes to even our salvation, we can think through like what a great gift eternal life is. We can think through about the giver, about who Jesus is, or that the Father gave up his Son. We can think about the timing of it, even our own timing, that Christ came at just the right time for us for when we needed him. Like, it's just, there are so many facets to salvation that I think it can be simple in terms of what you need to do to be saved. You confess on the Lord Jesus Christ. But then what does that mean, or what does that look like in terms of grace? There's just way more packed into those moments. And I just think that there's a lot for us to think through with it, even thinking through the transformation that grace or salvation brings. So yeah, when it comes to salvation, I think it would, to use a really old word, it would behoove us I know you weren't expecting that, but it would behoove us. I can't think of another word other
I'm
than
going to
that.
clip that and set that as your ringtone
No,
for me.
behoove. Yeah. To just really pay attention to our salvation and to what really happened there and what God did there. That it is, it might be simple, but it certainly was costly, and there's a lot of nuance to it too.
Yeah. Barclay talks a lot about, when he talks about singularity, right? Like you had mentioned the idea of it moving from the gift to the giver, and he talks about specifically like the spirit of. And I was seeing too, like, because he also will talk about it in terms of that like God only acts with grace, right? And I just think about that, right? This idea that like God only acts in grace, coupled with like sort of our views or our notions of salvation when it comes to like punishment or judgment or those sorts of things. Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would just, maybe the way I would put it, because this is how I'm actually going to put it in this week's upcoming sermon, is that grace is really, the way I would put it is that grace is the cornerstone of God's kingdom. Like it's the most important thing, in that we are only saved by grace, and that we are only welcomed in because of grace. And so that then needs to view or temper our viewpoints on every other kind of theological commitment we might have, that we begin with grace and we start with grace. And that's why we would say here, we're a grace first church. That we want to give grace first. And that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. It doesn't mean that there aren't judgments. We'll see that even on Sunday. But ironically, what we'll see on Sunday in the parable of the two debtors is that the person who refuses to live by the grace of God is the one who gets excluded from grace. That if you're unwilling to give it, there are consequences. You're not going to receive it. And so I do think that we need to filter everything in and through that view of grace, specifically because Christ died on the cross for us and welcomed us while we were sinners, that therefore that's grace, and that's the beginning of everything. And that needs to shape our theology of everything.
Question 3 says, how have different Christian traditions historically leaned into some perfections while neglecting others?
Yeah, I think that's very true. Actually, Barclay would go over some of those traditions even in his book, and how like Luther emphasized this area, or this thinker emphasized that area, or whatever it might be. There really has been some work to discern which is kind of prioritized in different settings and in different places. But off the top of my head, I can't remember how I would kind of define each of those different movements. And I don't want to characterize a movement without giving it the proper kind of thought. So I can't remember which one focused in on priority, or which one focused in on incongruity or singularity. I do know non-circularity was focused in a lot, especially in what's called like postmodern theological studies, was really, really emphasized there, with the lack of kind of focus on any of the other ones. I just think it's really easy to latch onto one, that grace is like the superabundant gift. And sometimes when we do that, we can forget that, but God is the giver of the gift. We need to remember that. Or we can forget that it's about the timing of the gift and when it came at just the right time for us, or that the gift changes us. It's not just meant to be something we receive. It's meant to receive us towards action. So I think I would say, actually in that, I would say sometimes the Baptist kind of traditions have emphasized the superabundance of grace, but sometimes forgot about its efficacy, that it's supposed to move you to something. It's not just to get across the finish line of salvation, that actually then there's supposed to be sanctification that grace brings about in your life. And we'll talk about that in 2 weeks, actually, with Wesley, and how I believe there is 3 kinds of grace, of what's called prevenient grace, justifying grace, and sanctifying grace. And that one of those is the salvation moment. The others are God's grace leading up to it and God's grace afterwards. And so we'll take a look at that too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I think I've said probably on this podcast before that like what you think about God and the nature of God will inform your theology, obviously, right? And as we talk about like grace being so central to who God is, right? And kind of this like foundation, that what you believe about grace is going to inform your theology too, right? Yeah. So you see it just in that simple example, right? Yeah. Of like superabundance over efficacy, that like, how much that plays out in what we believe and how we practice.
Yeah. You know what else is even like weirder is studies have shown too that what you think about God will actually change your brain. So if you believe that God is angry, judgmental, and vengeful and condemning, and you contemplate on that a lot, it actually enlarges those areas of your brain related to anger, condemnation, and judgment. So actually, literally, how you think about God can impact your physiology.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's really important for us to be thinking about God rightly and to think about the fact that grace, or you can say God's love, which are in some ways kind of synonymous, is the foundation of God's kingdom. If you get that wrong, everything else is going to go sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you think too, like I've said before, that like what you believe about God, also like we know there's a social implication to that too,
Sure.
right? What you believe about God will often inform your politics. It'll inform like different things in your life outside of the church space, right? So even to know like that there's a physiological element to that that's fueling those things as well. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it was fascinating, and also in some ways, I was going to say, really scary, terrifying, because you're like, if you get this wrong, we could end up being angry, judgmental people, and not even realize that we're turning ourselves into that.
Well, you recognize too, how fast like you're literally forming people, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
How it's not just like, it's not necessarily always just beliefs that people pick up or put down, right, or stop or start. Man, we'll do a whole episode on that later.
Yeah.
Your next politics series. We'll do
that one.
Our last question for today says, Barclay notes that not all traditions emphasize grace's singularity, that God acts only in grace. How does this distinction affect the way different Christian traditions talk about God's justice and judgment?
Okay, do you want to ask that again?
Yeah. It's a big one.
It is.
So Barclay notes that not all traditions emphasize grace's singularity, that God acts only in grace. How does this distinction affect the way different Christian traditions talk about God's justice and judgment?
Yeah, that I think if you forget that God works in grace, you can actually end up becoming, in many ways, like the parable we're going to take a look at this week, where you become you become the sin scorekeeper, and that all of a sudden it's like your job to be measuring who is in, who is out, who has made their way in, who is maybe doing the wrong things, who is maybe doing the right things. That when you forget about God and that He is the one who ultimately acts in grace and acts in love and saves us, you can easily turn into where we become the kind of the sin police or the border police of who is led into God's kingdom. And we're going to see that in this parable of two debtors, where there's one debtor who is set free from all this amount of this crazy high amount of money, and then he goes and he chokes the life out of another person who owed him like very little. And what you see there is really that the debts that were being paid, that man wanted to be the one who kind of controlled who is in and who is out, and he didn't let grace affect him. He didn't let grace change him, and so therefore, actually, at the end of the parable, he gets kicked out. And I think that for us, it's really easy to focus in on doing that scorekeeping when we forget that everything is about grace, and so that'll change how we react in the world with justice. It'll change how we act in the world with judgment. It'll frame those in probably improper and distorted ways. That if grace is not a part of it, I'm going to say your view of God is going to become distorted. And that's a really bad, and as we just said, a dangerous thing, because it actually shapes you, even if it's a distorted viewpoint.
Yeah, that I think that's super true. That like if you think that God is there are people that God wants in or out, right? Then you're going to more easily say, "Oh, you're in or you're out," right? And like just that if you think that there is another way that God acts, right, other than grace, then it's going to give you an opportunity to not act with grace. I think about like the line, like the image of God in me greets the image of God in you. That there's almost this like the grace that I have been given is the grace that I welcome you with, right? Or this like if I'm here by grace, then that must mean you're also here by grace, right? Or like even the people that we don't like or that we struggle with, or
I think even to go back to your question before on salvation, this is why it's important for us to pay attention to salvation and what we are saved from. That we're not so perfect and put together that Jesus is like, you don't have anything to do anymore. Like, you're great. No. Like, there was like sin within our hearts. There's distortion within our hearts, that we too have been saved and healed from that and forgiven from that. And we just can't ever forget our forgiveness, because if we do, we're going to end up saying that there is unforgiveness for other people, that will kind of end up being someone who loves to police those borders. And I just think that isn't healthy and that isn't helpful. And that's not our calling. That's up to the Spirit who does that.
Yeah.
And he can do that very well without our help. I think we love to help sometimes with that stuff.
Yeah. So when's Barclay coming to speak?
I would love to bring him out. Like, that would be...
The last time I heard you talk this much about somebody, he came and spoke. So I feel like after it reaches a certain threshold,
yeah,
they are coming here in some capacity.
Yeah, that's like one of the only perks, but that is, there's lots of good things with my role. But one of the perks is that occasionally you get to have these conversations with people that have I can kind of be a fanboy of their academic work, and because we did have Dr. Soon Cheng Ra come out and speak to us, which was great.
Andrew Root came
Andrew Root, yeah. I know. I'm sure Andrew Root listens to this podcast, so he would probably like to come back for free.
Yeah,
that's
probably
it. Yeah.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We love having these conversations, but they're even better when you are a part of them. So if you've got questions, thoughts, or topics that you'd love to hear about, or you can send us whatever. We'll give you advice. Let's just become an advice podcast.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun. Send us advice. If you got something we'll talk about it.
I'll give you my random ideas. That's fine.
Shoot us a text at 905-937-5300, or you can email communications@bethanycc.ca. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the BCC pod so you never miss an episode. We've got some cool things coming out over the next couple weeks around our AGM, which you don't want to miss out on. And if you're enjoying the podcast, do us a favor and leave a quick rating or review. It's a simple way to help others find us and be encouraged as well. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you all on Sunday and back here next week. Peace.
See ya.